What if I told you that the most painful thing a man can do to himself isn't getting rejected, isn't losing someone, isn't even being alone? It's spending his entire life desperately trying to be loved. You know the type. The guy who changes himself for every relationship. The man who performs, adapts, and contorts his personality, hoping someone will finally choose him. Society tells him this is normal. Machiavelli called it slavery. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why the man who needs to be loved is the weakest man in any room, and why true power begins the moment you stop caring whether anyone loves you at all. Or maybe you're that man right now, reading every text 3 times before sending it, wondering if she really meant what she said, analyzing every interaction for signs of approval. If that's you, what I'm about to reveal will either set you free or make you deeply uncomfortable. Probably both. But first, let me show you exactly what I mean. Picture 2 men at the same party. James is charming, attentive, reading every social cue, adjusting his opinions to match whoever he's talking to, laughing at jokes that aren't funny, agreeing with ideas he doesn't believe, nodding along to conversations that bore him, all because he needs people to like him. He's performing a careful dance where every step is calculated to avoid rejection. Watch him closely. He mirrors body language. He validates opinions he doesn't share. He tells people what they want to hear rather than what he actually thinks. Why? Because James has built his entire identity around being liked, being accepted, being loved. His self-worth is a democracy where everyone gets a vote except him. Across the room is Marcus. He says what he thinks without checking if it's the popular opinion. He doesn't apologize for his perspectives. He'll disagree with you to your face without softening the blow. He's not rude, but he's not performing either. Some people love him, some people hate him. He doesn't seem to care either way. He's not monitoring reactions. He's not adapting his personality. He's not wondering if people approve. Who has more power in that room? Hold that thought, because what I'm about to tell you will completely flip your understanding of masculine strength. James goes home thinking about every interaction, replaying conversations in his head, analyzing every word like a lawyer reviewing evidence, wondering if people liked him, losing sleep over whether he said the right thing, checking his phone obsessively for validation that never fully satisfies. His mind is a prison of other people's potential judgments. Marcus goes home and doesn't think about any of it. He sleeps like a man with a clear conscience because his worth isn't up for debate in his own mind. James is controlled by everyone at that party. Every person he spoke to has unconscious power over his emotional state. Marcus is controlled by no one. His internal state is his own domain. This is the difference between a man who needs love and a man who doesn't. And Machiavelli spent his entire career studying this exact dynamic in courts, in kingdoms, in the corridors of power where weak men were destroyed and strong men thrived. Here's the uncomfortable truth most men never face. The truth that will sting if you're honest enough to recognize yourself in it. Your need to be loved is the source of almost every problem in your life. Every compromise that made you feel smaller. Every boundary you failed to set because you didn't want to rock the boat. Every time you bit your tongue when you should have spoken. Every moment you pretended to be someone you're not to fit someone else's preferences. Every relationship where you gave more than you received and told yourself that's what love looks like. All of it comes from the same desperate place. The belief that if you just perform correctly, if you just say the right things, if you just become what they want, someone will finally love you enough to fill that void inside. But Machiavelli understood something that destroys this entire fantasy. He wrote in The Prince that it is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Now, before you misunderstand, he's not telling you to be cruel. He's not advocating for being hated. He's revealing something about human nature that most men are too afraid to accept. Here's what nobody tells you about that famous quote. Machiavelli wasn't just talking about ruling kingdoms or managing political power. He was talking about human psychology itself. He was revealing a fundamental truth about respect, attraction, and the actual dynamics that govern all human relationships. When you need to be loved, you give other people power over you. You hand them the remote control to your emotional state. Your happiness becomes contingent on their approval. Your self-worth becomes negotiable based on their opinion. You become a puppet, and they become the puppeteers, often without even trying. When you stop needing love, you take that power back. You reclaim sovereignty over your own sense of self. You become the author of your worth rather than letting others edit the manuscript of your value. Think about every relationship you've ruined by being too available, too accommodating, too eager to please. Play the movie back in your mind. What happened? The more you tried to be loved, the less lovable you became. The more you changed yourself to fit their preferences, the more respect you lost in their eyes. The harder you performed the role of perfect partner, the faster they left. They might not have even known why. They just felt something was off. That something was the stench of desperation, the energy of a man who doesn't value himself enough to have standards. This isn't a coincidence. This isn't bad luck. This is human psychology operating exactly as it's designed to operate. Machiavelli knew that people don't respect what they can control. They don't value what comes too easily. They don't desire what desperately needs their approval. Think about anything you've ever wanted. Did you value it more when it was difficult to obtain or when it was handed to you freely? The answer is obvious. Human beings are wired to value scarcity and devalue abundance. And the man who needs to be loved can be controlled easily, comes too easily, and desperately needs approval. Which means he's guaranteeing the exact opposite of what he wants. He's making himself abundant, available, controllable, and therefore, he's making himself undesirable. This is the cruel irony that destroys most men. They think neediness demonstrates love, but it actually demonstrates lack of self-respect. And nobody, man or woman, is attracted to someone who doesn't respect themselves. But here's where it gets really deep, where Machiavelli's insight cuts to the bone. Your need to be loved isn't even about love. Now I want to know something. What city are you watching this from right now? Drop your location in the comments, because I'm curious where real men are waking up to these truths. Let's see how global this understanding really is. Are you in New York, London, Sao Paulo, Tokyo, Mumbai? Where are the men who are ready to hear what society doesn't want them to know? Here's what Machiavelli discovered that changes everything about how you see yourself and your relationships. Your need to be loved is actually a need for validation that you exist, that you matter, that you have value in this world. It's not about the other person at all. It's about using them as a mirror to confirm your worth. When you were a child, love literally meant survival. If your parents didn't love you, didn't care for you, didn't protect you, you died. That's not metaphorical. That's biological reality. Your nervous system learned at the deepest level that love equals safety, that approval equals survival, that rejection equals death. This programming saved your life when you were helpless, but you're not a child anymore. And that's the problem that's running your life without your conscious awareness. You're still running childhood programming in an adult body. You're still seeking external validation for your worth, as if your survival depends on it. You're still trying to earn the approval that proves you deserve to exist. Your nervous system hasn't updated its software. It's still operating like you're 3 years old, and mommy's approval is the difference between life and death. Machiavelli would tell you to grow up, not as an insult, but as a factual observation about what maturity actually requires. He'd tell you that real men don't outsource their sense of self to other people's opinions. They don't need constant reassurance that they matter. They don't require validation to function in the world. They've done the difficult internal work of building self-worth that isn't negotiable, that doesn't fluctuate based on whether someone texted back or smiled at them or agreed with their opinion. Think about the strongest men you know personally or historically. Not the loudest men, not the men who perform strength, but the men who actually have it, who embody it, who don't need to convince anyone of it. Did they need to be loved? Did Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor, sit around wondering if his subjects liked him? Did Winston Churchill modify his personality for approval when Britain stood alone against the Nazis? Did your grandfather, if you had a real one, perform sensitivity hoping someone would validate him? The answer is no, because real men understand something that weak men never learn. Your value doesn't come from being loved. Your value comes from being valuable. And you can't be valuable when you're constantly changing yourself to fit other people's preferences. You can't build anything meaningful when your foundation is other people's approval. You can't stand for anything when you're always adapting to stand next to someone. Machiavelli wrote that the wise man does at once what the fool does finally. Think about what that means in this context. The fool spends decades trying to be loved. He performs, he compromises, he erodes himself piece by piece. He fails repeatedly. He suffers the consequences of having no boundaries, no standards, no self-respect. Eventually, if he's lucky and life beats him hard enough, he learns that he never needed anyone's love to be complete. The wise man learns this truth immediately and saves himself years of suffering, years of failed relationships, years of diminishing self-respect, years of looking in the mirror at someone he doesn't recognize anymore. So which one are you? Are you the fool still chasing love like it's oxygen? Or are you ready to become wise? Because understanding why you don't need love is just the beginning. Now we need to talk about what happens when you stop needing it. And that transformation, that's what actually gives you everything you thought love would provide. Remember that desperate need for love we just talked about? Machiavelli had a name for it. And once you understand what it really is, you'll never see relationships the same way again. He called it dependence. And dependence, in any form, is the death of masculine power. It's the slow poison that kills everything strong in a man. Think about your last relationship that didn't work. Not the one you pretend was mutual. Not the one you tell people ended amicably. The one where you were more invested, where the power dynamic was clear, where you knew deep down you needed them more than they needed you. You texted first every time. You made all the plans. You adjusted your entire schedule around their availability. You compromised your boundaries repeatedly. You tolerated behavior you didn't like. You accepted treatment you knew was beneath your standards. Why? Be honest. Because you needed them to love you more than you needed to respect yourself. Now ask yourself this question, and sit with the discomfort of the honest answer. In that relationship, did you have power or did they? The answer is obvious if you're willing to see it. They had all the power because they had something you needed. Your happiness was in their hands. Your validation came from their attention. Your sense of worth was determined by their approval. You gave them control over your emotional state. And Machiavelli would tell you, that's the same as giving them control over your life, over your decisions, over your self-respect. He wrote that men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, because everyone can see but few can feel. Translation: people judge you by what they observe in your behavior, not by what you tell them about your intentions. And what did your behavior in that relationship communicate to them at a level deeper than words? That you were beneath them in value, that you needed them more than they needed you, that your value was negotiable, your boundaries were flexible, your standards were adjustable. You didn't have to say any of this out loud. Your actions screamed it in a language that everyone understands instinctively. Every time you texted first, every time you were available immediately, every time you accepted less than you deserved, every time you forgave what shouldn't be forgiven. This is why the man who needs love never gets quality love. Because quality people don't respect desperation. They don't desire neediness. They don't value someone who has no standards, someone who will accept anything to avoid being alone. Think about it from their perspective for a moment. Step outside your own need and see yourself through their eyes. If someone is willing to change everything about themselves just to be with you, if they have no firm boundaries, if they tolerate your worst behavior without consequence, what does that tell you about them? It tells you they don't value themselves. And if they don't value themselves, why should you? This is the trap that destroys most men, the trap they walk into with their eyes wide open because nobody ever explained the rules of the game they're playing. They think love requires sacrifice of self. They believe relationships mean compromising your principles. They've been taught by movies and songs and well-meaning parents that caring means putting someone else's needs before your own, that love means making yourself smaller so someone else can feel bigger. But Machiavelli understood that this entire framework is designed to create weak men who are easy to control, easy to manipulate, easy to use and discard. Real power in relationships comes from the opposite approach. Here's what nobody tells you, what they actively hide from you because it threatens the entire social structure built on male compliance. The less you need someone, the more they want you. The The less you change yourself, the more attractive you become. The more comfortable you are alone, the better company you are to others. This isn't game playing. This isn't manipulation. This isn't some pickup artist tactic designed to trick people. This is just human psychology operating according to its fundamental laws. People are attracted to completeness. They desire independence. They respect self-sufficiency. These traits signal high value at a level deeper than conscious thought. And the man who doesn't need love has all three. He's complete without external validation. He's independent in his emotional state. He's self-sufficient in his sense of worth. But the man who needs love has none of these. He's incomplete without someone to validate him. He's dependent on others for his happiness. He's insufficient on his own, like a plant that dies without constant watering from external sources. Machiavelli would ask you a simple question that cuts through all the comfortable lies you tell yourself. If you need someone to love you in order to feel valuable, what happens when they leave? What happens when they stop? What happens when they choose someone else? Do you stop being valuable in that moment? Does your worth disappear with their approval? Does your value evaporate because they withdrew their validation? Of course not. Which means your value never came from them in the first place. You just convinced yourself it did because that lie was more comfortable than the truth. And that lie, that seductive, comfortable lie that someone else can give you worth, that another person can complete you, that you need love to be whole, that's what's keeping you weak. That's what's keeping you trapped. That's what's destroying every relationship you enter. Now let me show you what happens when you stop believing that lie. When you kill it completely and build something real in its place. When you stop needing love, something remarkable happens that most men never experience. You become the kind of man that high-quality people actually respect. Here's what Machiavelli understood about human nature that most men miss completely. People don't respect what they pity. They don't desire what seems desperate. They don't value what requires constant maintenance. And the man who needs love triggers all three responses. Pity for his obvious neediness, disgust at his desperation, exhaustion at the emotional labor required to constantly validate him. But when you genuinely don't need love, when you're completely fine alone, when your happiness doesn't depend on anyone's approval, you become something entirely different. You become rare. Think about the rarest thing in modern relationships. It's not good looks, it's not money, it's not even status. It's a man who is genuinely complete on his own. A man who doesn't need you to fill some void. A man who wants your company but doesn't require it for his sense of self. A man who can walk away at any moment and be perfectly fine. Machiavelli wrote that it is not titles that honor men, but men that honor titles. The same is true for relationships. It's not love that makes a man valuable. It's valuable men that make love meaningful. When you stop needing love, you can finally offer something worth having. Not your desperate need for validation. Not your performance of who you think they want, but your actual self. Complete, independent, with clear boundaries and genuine standards. And here's the part that will blow your mind. This is when real love becomes possible. Not the codependent attachment that modern culture calls love. Not the desperate clinging that romance movies celebrate, but actual respect between two complete people who choose each other without needing each other. Machiavelli believed that men are driven by two main motives, fear and love. But he understood that fear is more reliable because it's based on what people avoid, while love is unreliable because it's based on what people claim to feel. Translation: don't build your life around hoping someone will love you. Build your life around becoming someone impossible to ignore. Whether they love you or fear you or respect you becomes irrelevant when you're too focused on your purpose to care about their opinion. This is the freedom that most men never experience. They spend their entire lives in relationships performing, compromising, and slowly eroding their sense of self. They call it love. Machiavelli would call it slavery. Real men don't need to be loved because they understand something deeper. Love is not a need, it's a bonus. Your life works without it, you're complete without it, you're valuable without it. And when you truly integrate this truth, when it becomes part of your nervous system rather than just an idea you understand intellectually, everything changes. You stop texting first all the time. You stop being available whenever someone wants attention. You stop compromising your boundaries to keep someone around. You stop pretending to agree with things you don't believe. You stop performing a version of yourself that isn't real. Not because you're trying to play hard to get. Not because some dating coach told you this creates attraction. But because you genuinely don't need their approval anymore. And that authenticity, that real indifference to whether someone loves you, that's what actually makes you worth loving. Here's the paradox that Machiavelli understood centuries before modern psychology confirmed it. The moment you stop needing love is the moment you become lovable. The moment you stop seeking validation is the moment you become valuable. The moment you're complete alone is the moment you're good company. But most men never reach this point because they're too afraid of what it requires. It requires letting go of the comfortable lie that someone else can complete you. It requires facing the truth that you're responsible for your own happiness. It requires building a life so compelling that relationships become optional rather than necessary. Machiavelli wrote that the lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves. The man who needs love is neither fox nor lion. He's prey. He walks into every trap because he's too desperate to see it. He gets devoured by wolves because he's too weak to frighten them. But the man who doesn't need love, he's both fox and lion. Smart enough to avoid manipulation, strong enough to set boundaries, and completely unbothered by whether that makes him loved or feared. Now let me show you the signs that you're still trapped in needing love, because awareness is the first step to freedom. First sign: you change your opinions based on who you're talking to. You don't have fixed principles. You have adaptable positions designed to make people like you. You're a different person with different groups. Second sign: you can't be alone without feeling anxious. Silence feels threatening. Solitude feels like punishment. You need constant connection to feel okay. You fill every quiet moment with distraction. Third sign: you take rejection personally. When someone doesn't want you, it feels like a referendum on your worth rather than just incompatibility. You internalize their choice as evidence of your inadequacy. Fourth sign: you monitor people's reactions constantly. You're always scanning for approval or disapproval. You adjust your behavior in real time based on micro-expressions and tone shifts. Fifth sign: you apologize excessively. Not for actual wrongs, but for existing, for having needs, for taking up space. Sound familiar? These aren't personality traits. These are symptoms of a disease. The disease of needing external validation to feel internally complete. Machiavelli would tell you that you can't negotiate with this disease. You can't manage it. You can't make it comfortable. You have to kill it completely, and killing it requires something most men aren't willing to do. You have to be alone. Not just physically alone, truly alone. No dating apps filling the void, no casual relationships providing validation, no constant texting keeping you connected. Actual solitude where you face yourself without distraction. This is where weak men break and strong men are forged. Because in that solitude, you'll discover one of two things. Either you're empty without external validation, which means you have work to do, or you're complete on your own, which means you're ready for real relationships. Machiavelli believed that wise men are always ready to do what the times require, and these times require men who don't need to be loved. Men who can stand alone, men who have standards, men who won't compromise their principles for companionship, because society is drowning in men who need love. Men who will tolerate anything to avoid being alone. Men who have no boundaries because they have no self-respect. And that creates a race to the bottom where everyone settles for relationships that make them miserable because they're too afraid to be alone. But when you become the man who doesn't need love, you break that pattern. You set a new standard. You show other men what's possible. And you attract people who respect strength rather than exploit weakness. Here's what your life looks like when you stop needing love. You wake up, and your happiness doesn't depend on a text message. You go through your day and your worth doesn't require validation. You make decisions based on your principles rather than other people's approval. You set boundaries and you don't apologize for them. You speak your truth and you don't soften it to make people comfortable. You build your life around your purpose rather than around keeping someone happy. And relationships? They become something you choose rather than something you need. You evaluate people based on whether they add value to your life, not whether they validate your existence. You leave situations that don't serve you without guilt or hesitation. You demand reciprocity because you know your time and energy are valuable. This is the freedom Machiavelli was pointing toward. Not the freedom to do whatever you want, but the freedom from needing anything from anyone. That's real masculine power. That's what actually makes you strong. Not muscles or money or status symbols, but internal completeness that can't be shaken by external circumstances. If this video made you question everything you thought you knew about love and relationships, I need you to do something right now. Drop in the comments this exact phrase: "I don't need to be loved to be valuable." I want to see how many men are ready to claim this truth. Type it out. Own it. Let it sink into your nervous system as you write it. After you comment that, hit the subscribe button because this channel is for men who are done performing, done pretending, and done needing validation from a world that doesn't respect weakness. We're building a community of men who understand that real strength comes from within, not from other people's approval. And here's what's coming next. The next video reveals something even more controversial about masculinity that society desperately doesn't want you to understand. Something about power, purpose, and why the comfortable life is actually destroying you from the inside. You're not going to want to miss what's coming because it builds directly on this foundation and takes it to the next level.